Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about avoidant attachment, which is when a child has a pattern of behavior which he rarely cries when separated from the primary caregiver and avoids contact upon his or her return. And like I said, usually this is due to abuse or neglect. They don't trust that the parent is there to protect them. They don't trust the parent's going to meet their needs. So they have an avoidant attachment to them. They could pretty much do without them, really. And so we're going to pick up on ambivalent or resistant attachment, a pattern in which a child becomes anxious before the primary caregiver leaves, is extremely upset during his or her absence, and both seeks and resists contact on his or her return. And that usually has to do with the child being not emotionally nurtured. You know, like the child was left to cry it out in another room or whatever. So they don't quite trust this caregiver to meet their needs. It might be the only caregiver that they have. And so therefore they're, anxious for them to not leave them alone, but also they don't quite trust them to meet their needs. So, children aren't emotionally adept at speaking how they feel. But if they're sad and they cry when the parent leaves, but then when the parent comes back, they might be mad at him. They might even smack at him or whatever. It's because the child doesn't trust them to be there for them. And they're angry that they left them. And this wells up. And of course, a child doesn't have the words to express how they feel about that. So they'll act it out, using their ambivalent attachment. Disorganized or disoriented attachment, a pattern in which child, after separation from the primary caregiver, shows contradictory behaviors upon his or her return. And so that's, again, similar to that, but they're not quite sure how to feel, So there might be some problems there. It might just be the child is, shy or emotional. And so they're not quite sure how to respond. So, these are just the different kinds of attachment that they study. Let's see. How attachment is established. Both mothers and babies contribute to security of attachment by the way they respond to each other. Virtually any activity on a baby's part leads to a response from an adult and can be an attachment-seeking behavior. Sucking, crying, smiling, clinging, or looking into the caregiver's eyes. As early as the 8th week of life, Ainsworth observed, babies direct these behaviors particularly to their mothers. The overtures are successful when the mother responds warmly, expresses delight, and gives the baby frequent physical contact and freedom to explore. So that's how you should be responding to the child. If you're upset with the child, if you act like you're angry that the child needs you, or you're anxious about caring for the child, babies sense that. They know that. So you need to be there for that child and be warm and sensitive to that child so they can grow to be a decent person. Excuse me. Influences on attachment. Why does one baby show secure attachment while another seems insecure? The reason is probably not genetic. Dizygotic twins are unlikely to be similarly attached as monozygotic twins, suggesting that parental treatment may be a more important factor. The key to attachment may lie in an interplay between the quality of the relationship with the caregiver and the infant's emotional makeup. So the quality of the care they get and the child's own emotions play into the attachment. But honestly, unless your child has severe mental, emotional problems at birth, your parenting style is going to have a lot to do with that. Just saying. The role of temperament. How much influence does a child's temperament exert on attachment? And in what ways? Findings vary. Some studies have identified frustration levels, amounts of crying, irritability, and fearfulness as predictors of attachment. Because a child who's frustrated is going to be more irritated. Indicators such as variability in heart rate, which is associated with irritability, may reflect underlying neurological or physiological conditions. So, the baby can be a certain way. It's possible. There's always an exception to the rule. Intergenerational transmission of attachment patterns. The way a mother remembers her attachment to her parents seems to predict the way her children will be attached to her. The adult attachment interview is a semi-structured interview that asks adults to recall and interpret feelings and experiences related to their childhood attachments. An analysis of 18 studies using the AAI found that the clarity, coherence, and consistency with which these early attachments are remembered and interpreted reliably predicts the security with which the respondent's own child will be attached to him or her. So children learn what they live. You probably learned your parents' parenting style and passed that on, unless you realized it wasn't a good parenting style and you intervened and stopped whatever was going on and did things the way you felt was the right way to do things. Long-term effects on attachment. As attachment theory predicts, security of attachment seems to affect emotional, social, and cognitive competence. The more secure a child's attachment to a nurturing adult, the easier it is for the child eventually to become independent of that adult, as Kathy Bateson did in mid-adolescence, and to develop good relationships with others. The link between attachment in infancy and characteristics observed years later underscores the continuity of development and the interrelationships of its various aspects. So there you see, if you are nurtured and supported as a child, you will grow up to be a more well-adjusted, outgoing person. Like I said, though, everyone has their own temperament, so it might just be a thing. But overall, if you nourish and support that child, they're going to have a better outcome than a child who was, emotionally neglected or abused. Mutual regulation. A process by which infant and caregiver communicate emotional states to each other and respond appropriately. And if you've ever had a child, you know this, child might, like, I didn't like that. And you're like, oh, sorry, and they're like, me, So you're communicating your emotions about this situation back and forth. And that's what you should be doing. You should be showing the child that you have compassion for them, understanding for them, so that they understand that you're there for them and you're going to help them meet their needs until a time when they don't need you to help them, meet your needs anymore. And as we read in the previous paragraph, if a child's needs are not met, then that child can become clingy, that child can become dependent, because they don't trust that they can meet their own needs because you didn't meet their needs. How much less capable are they as a child to meet their own needs, So they feel dependent, like somebody else has to meet their needs for them. And there's a whole section of psychotherapy that has to deal with that. Still face paradigm. Research method used to measure mutual regulation in infants 2 to 9 months old. So in a research method used to measure, in the still face episode, which follows a normal face-to-face interaction, the mother suddenly becomes stony-faced. Excuse me. Had a little allergy thing this weekend. I guess it's coming back. Silent and unresponsive. Then a few minutes later, she resumes normal interaction. During the still face episode, infants tend to stop smiling and looking at the mother. They may make faces, sounds, or gestures, or may touch themselves, their clothing, or a chair, apparently to comfort themselves or to relieve the emotional stress created by the mother's unexpected behavior. And so I think that's a cruel experiment, but again, that's how we learn. But see, the child is clearly in distress. When mom stops responding, mom's just like, zoned out. They're clearly in distress. They're trying to comfort themselves some kind of way. So that tells you that the child needs mom or dad or grandma or whoever's taking care of this child. They need that adult to interact and respond to them on an emotional level. How a mother's depression affects mutual regulation. So, I'm not going to go into all that. There's like 2 pages worth of stuff there. But clearly, if you're depressed, you're not there for your child. And your child is going to suffer because of that. Your child is going to have stress because there's no emotional interaction between you. Or, if you're really depressed, you might cry about having to take care of the child. And then the child sees this and is like, oh my God, I'm this horrible burden, and, the child later on can decide they don't need anything because it's too stressful to you, which causes them stress. So there are children who develop the failure to thrive, so this can be a big deal. Also, if you're not meeting the child's needs, then the child is going to develop the thought that I can't trust the world. It's not a trustworthy place. It couldn't meet my needs. I can't meet my needs, and so you end up with this anxious, depressed child itself. So if you have depression, get it treated. Go to therapy. If you need medication, take the medication. People say, oh, I don't like the medication because it makes me feel not like me. Well, yeah, because your brain is used to being depressed. And that the chemicals in your brain are not right. But sometimes the brain likes that chemical imbalance because it might have more of one thing it likes than the other. But the drugs will level you out. Some people say, I feel like a zombie. Well, if you feel that bad, talk to the doctor. Lower your dosage. Stranger anxiety. Wariness of strange people and places, shown by some infants during the second half of the first year. And that is a survival instinct. You don't know this person. You don't know what they're capable of. You don't know what their intentions are. So it's normal for a child to be a little anxious around strangers, especially if the child is come up in isolation with pretty much just the mother and father, no outside, aunts, uncles, or friends visiting. This child, when it sees someone it doesn't know, it's going to be like, oh no, I don't know. What are they up to? I don't understand. So that is something that some children have, stranger anxiety. Separation anxiety, distress shown by an infant when a familiar caregiver leaves. And that is normal. If they grew up with this caregiver and that's their caregiver, and the caregiver might leave them at daycare with grandma or whatever, they're sad when this person leaves. They're anxious when this person leaves because they know they can trust this person. This is the person who's been raising them. But now suddenly you're leaving me with this other person. I don't know if I can trust them to help me meet my needs. So, they cry and they don't want mom or dad to leave. It breaks your heart. Social referencing. Understanding an ambiguous situation by seeking out another person's perception of it. And we all do this a lot, social referencing. What do you think about that? How did you feel about that? Because as humans, we are kind of insecure. We're living in this body behind these eyes that we can't, like I said, we can't see our own face. That's the first thing we realize is like all these people are out here. I'm in here. I can't even see my own face without a mirror. I must be something different. Or, some people go the grandiose way, I must be something special, and we're all special and unique, but some people take that too far. And some people go the other way and feel like I'm this defective thing, this, automaton, and all these people out here are spectacular. And neither way is good. You need to be somewhere in the middle and realize, hey, I am this person. We all are like this and, have life. So we all do social referencing to check other people's opinions on things, because as human beings, we're a little insecure, I self. Dr. James's term for the subjective entity that seeks to know about itself. So I'll have an I self. We want to know who we are. Where do we come from? What do we want out of life? Me self. James's term for what a person objectively knows about himself or herself, also called your self concept. So, my favorite color is purple. I like pineapple. Those are parts of me self or my self concept. Yours is probably different, might not be different. I don't know. But we all have one. Your self concept, sense of self, descriptive and evaluative, blah, 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 don't have a stroke, mental picture of one's abilities and traits. So we know what we're good at, and we know what we're not good at, and we know our traits. And we either like them or we don't. And if we like them, then we can keep doing them. And if we don't like them, we can try to change that. My goodness. Self-efficacy, sense of capability to master challenges and achieve your goals. If you're going to get anywhere in life, you need a sense of self-efficacy. Because if you don't have that, then you're not sure you can meet your goals or follow your dreams or anything like that. So by having that sense that you can do these things, you're more likely to achieve than if you don't. So that's a good thing to have. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. This is something we studied pretty hard in child psychology. Excuse me. Erikson's second stage in psychosocial development, in which children achieve a balance between self-determination and control by others. And this is when your little one starts to rebel. I want to be in charge. I want to do it my way. Tired of you being in charge all the time. That's your toddler speaking. So yeah, they're going to start trying to do this. They're going to be autonomous little people. However, if you discourage that and cause them shame, like what you did was not okay. Now there are natural punishments. That's a fact of life. Sometimes you have to punish a child. But if you are punitive, and you make them feel, aren't you ashamed of yourself, and internalize in them that they're bad, then they're not going to be able to become autonomous. Because what you've taught them was, you're right, they're wrong, they're flawed, they aren't capable of making good decisions or thinking for themselves. So they have to let you do that for them, right? So they doubt themselves because they don't think they're capable, because you didn't think they were capable. So again, you need to be nourishing and supportive of these children and teach them, you can do it, I know you can do it, because they can. Socialization, development of habits, skills, values, and motives shared by responsible, productive members of a society. So if you want to be that, you should have been socialized. Now there are people, and I hear different things about that. There are a couple of schools of thought. One says, you have to send your child to public school so they can be socialized. Well, I was in public school, and I unfortunately had to send mine to public school. And there's a lot of Lord of the Flies mentality going on in public school. Teachers can't watch everybody. Kids are getting bullied. Kids are getting, picked on. Stuff happens. So there's another school of thought that says, oh no, you should never have children around other children because they'll get bullied and, hurt like that in a public school setting. You can have your child, homeschooled, private school, whatever, private tutor, and then you can take them out to parks to play with other children. They can play with other children in the neighborhood, but there's no reason to ever expose them to hundreds of other children where they can be possibly victimized by hundreds of children. So the schools on that are different. But if your child is socialized, they learn to be social. So they need some socialization. Otherwise, they're going to be awkward, shy, very insecure. So you got to let the kids socialize. Internalization, a process by which children accept societal standards of conduct as their own, fundamental to socialization. And we all do that at some point in time. We internalize, and I tell you, you kids internalize everything. So when your tween wants to be like everybody else and do what everybody else is doing, it's because they've accepted that this way, or this thing that they're supposed to like is the norm, and so they want to be a part of that. And that's a normal phase of growing up, so don't try to discourage it, because then all you're doing is teaching them that they're bad, they're making bad decisions, blah, blah, blah. And they need to feel like they're capable, choosing their own route in life, because you shouldn't be choosing that for them, because then they're going to wake up one day and be like, who am I? What is this about? I don't even know who I am. I just did what my parents wanted me to do. And that's not good. That doesn't have good outcomes usually. Conscience. Internal standards of behavior, which usually control one's conduct and produce emotional discomfort when violated. Like they say in the Bible, train up the child in the way they should go, and they went out stray far from it as an adult. So you as a parent have direct programming access to that conscience. What you teach them about the spiritual way of being, the way of thinking, the way of loving or hating, unfortunately, the way of being a decent person. You're programming into them what they are going to, assign as their conscience. Now they'll pick up other stuff from other kids, other adults, school, programs on TV even, to what, they feel is right. So you start out with the programming, but then they switch over and decide, I'm in charge of what I feel is right. But we all have a basic conscience as far as society goes of right and wrong. Killing other people, wrong. Stealing other people's stuff, wrong. Coveting other people's and committing adultery with other people's spouses, wrong. So, we all have a part in that. Self-regulation, a child's independent control of behavior to conform to understood social expectations. This is where problems with, ADD, ADHD, certain, other mental problems come in, where the child cannot self-regulate, because self-regulation, when you tell a group rule, like when I taught preschool, sit down on the floor, crisscross applesauce, be still, be quiet. If the child is not capable of doing that, then that's a problem in the classroom. I deal with that with one of my sons. He was a problem in the classroom, and so we got him some help to make it so he was not a problem in the classroom and distracting everybody else with his behaviors. But, that's an important skill in order to take direction, because you're going to have to take direction in school. You're going to have to take direction in college. You're going to have to take direction in job training. You're going to have to take direction at your job. You're going to have to take direction in society because we have laws. So that's an important skill that, you need to master. Inhibitory control. Conscious, effortful holding back of impulses. And that's another problem that people with ADD or ADHD have, is impulse control. Most of us, learn by probably getting punished to control your impulses. If you see something you want, you just don't grab it. If you see someone you don't like, you just don't go up and smack them. You don't go up and pet strange dogs because they might bite you. We have to learn some, oh my goodness, a little fuzzy or something got in my eyeball there. Inhibitory control, things that inhibit our impulses, because we all have impulses, and children especially are very impulsive. They're going to do stuff. Like I said, them little people crazy. They're going to do stuff. You got to watch them. Committed compliance. Kachonska's term for wholehearted obedience of a parent's orders without reminders or lapses. And that is a rare child that does that. My father would have loved that if we were all that way. Because, those are the children who are not problems. Anything the parent wants, they do it. Anything the parent says, they do it. You don't have to ask them twice. So, committed compliance is rare in a child, but occasionally you get a kid that understands. Like I had a middle child, he got the program, you didn't have to bug him too much. Situational compliance. Kachonski's term for obedience of a parent's orders only in the presence of signs of ongoing parental control. They did an experiment in a classroom, we might have talked about that in another one, where they had a bag of candy, and, or a little candy kind of machine, and if you put the coin in, it would come out, but they said, don't touch it till we come back. And then they didn't, and then it made a mess, and the one kid was mad at the other kid, and, stuff like that. So situational compliance, like when the teacher leaves the room, free for all, that's situational. And that's how a lot of people are when they're kids. Hopefully you outgrow that as you get older. We're skipping ahead. Let's see. Okay. A lot of this is straight up development stuff about children that we've kind of already dealt with, so it would be basically a recap. So, I'm not into that. I'm trying to give you new, fresh information. Okay. We're moving on to personal growth, ages 3 to 6, and we're talking about obesity. Extreme overweight in relation to age, sex, height, and body type, defined in childhood as having a body mass index at or above the 95th percentile of growth curves for children of the same age and sex. And mine were usually up in the 90%. Usually it was because of height. I personally am obese, technically. By the old standards, not, but by the new standards, I am. So, anyway, this can be a problem. And usually, we all know it's from overeating and lack of exercise, And in children, that's a bad thing. Because if they start out that way, they're usually going to end up that way. Now, some get skinnier as time goes on, but not usually. So if you can keep your kid at a healthy weight, introduce healthy foods to them, make it fun, make pretty little, things out of your food that appeal to the kids, but try to get them to eat healthy, because if a child is obese, chances are they're going to stay that way, and they're going to have cholesterol and diabetes problems, and we don't want that for our kids. Once they're grown, we can't really do a whole lot about it. We can nag them and say, oh man, you're eating too much junk, but chances are they're going to make up their own mind once they're grown. So keep it down while they're kids. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. And hopefully that helped you to figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Until next time.